excited with our first panel of today. This panel is going to help set the tone for the rest of the day. This is really three amazing people. Again, they're my three vice chairs, and they're going to share with you their thoughts on why the US IP Alliance, why, with this important opportunity, why the US IP Alliance can play an important role, and how we're going to go at it. So I'm going to introduce all three of them. First, Joyce Ward, who's Director of Education with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Dave Kappos, who former Chief IP Counsel with IBM, then former Director of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, now partner with Cravath. And then Paul Michel, who is a former Chief Federal Circuit Judge and now runs Paul Michel Consulting. And so with that, I'm going to start with Dave. Would you please share your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, good morning. Thanks, Scott. And let me start by saying it is just a thrill to be here and to be part of this community, to see so many friends, I'll say old friends, lots of old friends, not that any of us is chronologically old, but we've known each other for a long time. And it's just very, very special for me to also be in Atlanta, a city that really knows innovation and building on what started, I remember now going back more than a decade ago, the Georgia IP Alliance, and coming here when Scott and others, I don't know if it was when it was first formed, but when it was young, as the director of the PTO. And I remember meeting with you guys and you guys brokering a meeting with the mayor and like spending a day here and going back to Washington, D.C. and saying there is something really special going on in Georgia and in Atlanta, and we need to loop into that, and we need to have the USPTO figuring out how to work with what the folks in Georgia and Atlanta are doing and how to take it national. And so years later, at the start of the pandemic, basically, Scott calls me up, I'm long since, out of office, and says, I want to do this thing called the US IP Alliance, and it's going to be the Georgia IP Alliance, but an umbrella organization for our entire country to form alliances in all the cities and states and regions that make sense. And the first thing I'm thinking when Scott says that is, well, this clearly is a vision that Scott had going way back, but it also is what, I wouldn't call it a vision, what seemed obvious to us at the USPTO when I was there, Joyce and I and others in this room were working together then, that this model needs to be scaled. It needs to be national. And then, of course, now it's even global, and I'm sure we'll come back to that a number of times during the day. So, what is, why is this special? Why are we all investing time in it? The first thing I would say for the US IP Alliance, and again, this is something I learned when I was in the government, is that important intellectual property issues like just education of kids and adults, young, older, whatever, it doesn't happen at the national level. It's got to happen in person at the city level. It's very much retail, right? And as great as our national organizations are, and I'm members of just about all of them and spend a lot of time on all of them, I love them. They need help from organizations that can be very much on the ground. This is why in the beginning the Georgia IP Alliance worked so well, and Atlanta became such a hub for all of this. So, I immediately aligned and felt that the US IPA could be really special, really add value, work well, and accelerate the efforts, and I'll come back to that, of all the other national and even international intellectual property organizations, but add something really special by being able to take intellectual property from the national level all the way down to kids in cities all over our country, in schools, young adults in colleges, professionals, inventors, who need to connect with legal help and with sources of capital and with mentoring, et cetera, et cetera. So it's about taking intellectual property and everything that's so wonderful but complicated about it and daunting about it, and bringing it from the national level all the way down to the individual level. And US IP Alliance, in my mind, in my heart, is simply about that. So what it's doing, thanks to Scott's absolutely brilliant leadership, and I hope we get to come back to that later too, is it's doing both of those things. It's working extremely well with the national organizations that exist. I'll give you a few examples. IPO Education Foundation. I'm on the board of that. Judge Michelle's on the board of that. There's other people in the room who invest a lot of energy. It's a great organization. It works already extremely well with the Michelson Foundation out in California, and actually national, that Gary Michelson created, on education of people in all ages, but starting with school-age kids, and I think mainly going up to college-age kids. And then the USPTO, as Joyce will tell you, has an enormous set of programs, thanks to Joyce's leadership now going back over a decade. And they all work together already. So that's good, great, it's done. But what US IP Alliance is now adding, right, is further accelerating that both across the regional organizations that are being formed, Georgia, New York, California, et cetera, right? And there'll be more discussion about those organizations during the day, and then down to the individual level, which is so hard to do otherwise. So that's where the power is, in my mind. And then the one other thing I would say on this, sort of introductory basis, why this is also special, is that there's a certain simplicity to what Scott and the team has set up. The 3 pillars that we can all very easily align about: education and awareness, collaborative engagement, diversity, inclusion, are super important. They're super topical. They're super 21st century oriented, and they enable us all to sort of do things that are very practical on a national, but again, driving right down to the individual person basis that we so desperately needed in the US and globally, and now we have with US IP Alliance. So I've probably gone on too long already, Scott. I'm going to stop there so some others can talk.
All right. Well, Dave, great thoughts, and again, appreciate your leadership. I'm going to turn it over to Joyce. Joyce, why don't you share your thoughts?
Okay, and I think I'm going to use this mic because it will not go off.
Okay, yeah. Technology. All right.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. Thank you. I am from the South, so we always need that call and response to get things started.
Is your mic working?
This one is.
Okay. Yep.
It will not go off, so I figured rather than have the reverberation. So just in terms of what brought me to the U.S. Intellectual Property Alliance, in one word, it would be Scott. In 2 words, it would be Scott and Dave. But the main focus, I think there's so much like energy. The idea that we as a country know very little about intellectual property. And I think that that is because we use it every day, we see it every day, but it's become so ubiquitous that we don't even think about it. And for some individuals, we don't have a real sense of what it is and how it literally impacts us. And so the excitement for the US IP Alliance is that we have the opportunity to reach locally. As Dave said, we have the opportunity to reach into communities, to reach into states, because in Washington, in Alexandria at the USPTO, we talk about intellectual property quite a bit. We bring in students, which is wonderful. But really having that opportunity, we know students have brilliant ideas in and around Alexandria, that's great, but we know that students everywhere and people everywhere have brilliant ideas, whether it's with the Independent Inventor Conferences where you have older people most of the time coming into USPTO and learning about the process, or whether it's working with university students. We see across the country there's a real need for increased knowledge and awareness. And I think the US IPA really brings that opportunity together. Looking at national organizations that are working in various communities, it will sound cliche, but we are much stronger together than we are apart. And so when you have the power of an intellectual property owners foundation, of the Michelson Foundation, of AIPLA, IPO, I'm gonna try to go through as many as I can into when you have those organizations that are really focused on intellectual property, working together and thinking about the impact. This room, the people in this room, you know why intellectual property is important. You care about it, you understand it, but you're not average. And we have to find a way to get more information to more people. To do that at state levels, to do that at local levels, and that is by sharing the information and sharing among organizations. That is the way that we do that. And US IPA Alliance, that was the attraction for me personally, is the opportunity to have a broader reach. Now, I remember Dave Kapos, I still call him Director Kapos, I must say. I remember him basically saying, I want to reach 1 million people. And I said, well, I think we can do that. We can create some programs that are going to reach 1 million people. We started that Girl Scout IP patch and a program with the National Science Foundation, Science of Innovation. And I came back and I think we've reached 1 million now. And he's like, okay, well, we want to reach 2 million. And the attraction of US IPA is that we can reach millions. And with the, we can reach billions actually, in terms of looking at the potential impact. And again, I think there's so many people who don't know about intellectual property. There's a tremendous opportunity. There's a tremendous dearth, but there's also a tremendous opportunity. And I think that through this organization, we have the ability to do that, especially to reach to communities that perhaps have not heard about patents or trademarks or copyrights or trade secrets, or want to know how those impact them. Why should they care? So it's really exciting and an opportunity to work together to have an impact.
Thank you, Joyce, for those great thoughts. All right, now we're going to turn to the magic of technology. So Paul Michel could not be here in person, but we have him on Zoom, actually on YouTube Live. And Paul, welcome, and would you please share your thoughts?
I'm sorry to not be with you all in Atlanta in person at this auspicious event, but I have some medical restrictions that still apply. I want to focus on what may be a somewhat new perspective, which has to do with whether the public, the politicians, the press, the policymakers lack understanding and information about IP systems versus whether they have been inundated with misinformation and false and misleading claims that patents do not help the economy but hurt the economy, that they do not promote innovation but impede innovation, and so forth. So I see a critical role for US IPA and its state chapters and other affiliates to try to correct the serious misimpressions that so many members of our society presently have about the IP systems, all of them, patents, trademarks, copyrights, and even trade secrets. So there's a critical need. It wasn't being filled by any of the many fine organizations that we all know about by their alphabet names, but it is a huge need that must be fulfilled, and US IPA has constituted itself and poised itself to do exactly that. I can't think of anything that would be more important because judges are misinformed, congressional staff is misinformed, reporters are misinformed, and many others in our society, including ordinary consumers, about the benefits of IP and making it reliable and enforceable and obtainable without undue delay or cost. So I want to congratulate Scott and Joyce and Dave and all the other leaders of US IPA for launching an effort that can actually, and this is no exaggeration, save the economy, and save the country. Thank you.
Well said, Paul. Thank you. All right. So with that, you've got a sense hope of why USIPA and the opportunity that we have to do so amazing things together. I'm going to go back to our panelists and ask them the future. Where do they see it going, and what's the role for citizens, I'll say human beings in our country and really around the world to come together? So I'm going to go to Joyce first.
So I think one of the things that I've seen the most is the opportunity. I think it is Jim Malachowski who calls it the network of networks. You have so many people in different organizations who have a strong awareness. And I think the opportunity is to bring that knowledge to a variety of levels, to think about what we can do together, not to repeat, but to work together to bring more information to more communities. USIPA has three main pillars, but one of the ones that or two of the ones that I want to talk about are the education piece, and we talked about that some. We've talked about collaboration, working together, but that third piece is diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And I think we really have to think about not just who is there, who's in the room, but who's not in the room.
New York City and the same in Vermont. People don't get it, and they need the help of the USIPA. So I see an organization that's got an umbrella of these chapters all over the country that can reach individual people in schools and businesses in their communities. Again, that is so important. It's all very much, retail, if you will, local. And then I see this global alliance that Scott has started to build, from traveling around and trying to do pro bono work on an international level. You find out pretty quickly that if awareness is low in the U.S., it's much lower elsewhere. And if access to services is a problem in the U.S., it is a much bigger problem elsewhere. But the one thing that isn't different anywhere is creativity, right? The people everywhere in the world that I've met are just as creative. The problem is they don't have the championing, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the outlet, they don't have access to the resources. They have even less of that than folks here have. So the Global Alliance becomes, right, the ultimate channel to build IP awareness and IP, the importance of IP as an enabler and encouragement for innovation on a global basis. There is so much to do, right? It's daunting to even think about all of that, but it's like anything else, one step at a time, and Scott's got us taking the first step.
Thank you, Dave. Great thoughts. And we're going to come back to Paul Michel. Paul, the future and roles regular people can do, IP people can do to help make this a reality.
Well, here's the irony. Because most of IP law is federal law, and federal agencies such as the USPTO help to implement it along with the federal courts, one might think that the only important location is Washington, D.C., because that's where those officials tend to be congregated when they're working and voting. But actually, I think the local level is vastly more important, because the people in Washington who make policy and affect policy and implement policy are responsive to the people, because we live in a democracy. And so the local affiliates of USIPA under the leadership and priorities of and pillars of the national organization are actually the key, in my view, to correcting misimpressions and filling in gaps in understanding. So this organization is national, but its implementation is heavily local, which I think is going to prove to be the magic, because everybody in the political world responds to local people, local consumers, local companies, employers, local needs for economic growth, for increasing family incomes, for inclusion of underrepresented groups, and all the rest of our priorities. So the structure of US IPA, I think in the future is going to turn out to be the magic, and it reflects the wisdom and realism of the leadership. When Scott and David asked me if I would be willing to participate and even serve as a vice chair, I instantly said yes, because the need for this was huge, and the plan for it made perfect sense. And so my prediction for the future is that USIPA, with all of its affiliates nationally and locally, but even globally, will save for society vibrant, reliable, fair, efficient IP systems. And if we do that, or the degree to which we can do that, all people benefit enormously.
Excellent, Paul. Thank you for those thoughts, and I think that's a good way to close this panel out. As we do, I do want to tell you, you're going to hear a lot more, right? You heard a lot about the pillars, about IP awareness and education. You heard about collaborative IP ecosystem, IP diversity and inclusion. Throughout the day, you're going to hear a lot more details on what the US IPA is doing to help Americans and to be the role model of the world. We also heard about the network of networks, IP network of networks, again, coined by Jim Malachowski. It's catching on, and you're going to hear about how that network is being built and how you can be a part of it. And so with that, we're going to close this panel out, and the next panel will be part of the IP Network of Networks. You're going to hear from a number of IP national organizations and how they're coming together in ways that they never had, and how the US IPA is playing an important role. So with that, if you would give our vice chairs a round of applause. Thank you for great work. Thank you, Paul.